At the long, glittering mahogany table where laughter and arrogance filled the air, Madeline turned toward her husband, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier light as she spat on his face, the same man she once vowed to love in sickness and in health. The room fell silent. Her parents exchanged smug glances, their wealthy friends whispering, "Serves him right." To them, Evan, her wheelchair-bound husband dressed in a modest suit, was just a crippled nobody who had outlived his usefulness. But what none of them knew, what not even Madeline's new lover, smirking beside her, could imagine, was that the man they mocked owned the very company her proud parents worked for their entire lives. Beneath the quiet restraint in his eyes wasn't shame, but power. Power he'd kept hidden behind the disguise of weakness. And as her spit rolled down his cheek, his calm smile promised something far colder than anger. But who exactly was Evan before the chair and the pity? Why would a billionaire pretend to be broken? And when Madeline walked out of that dinner arm in arm with her lover, how did Evan's revenge crush her world forever? The clink of silverware echoed like judgment in the chandelier-lit dining room of the Harpers' mansion. Crystal glasses shimmered, perfumes mingled, and laughter floated around the table like money talking to itself. Evan sat quietly at the far end, his wheelchair stationed beside Madeline, who looked every inch the wealthy daughter of her proud parents, Leonard and Grace Harper. Her skin glowed under the soft amber light, her dress sculpted perfectly to her body, her smile trained for society. To everyone else, she was elegance itself. To Evan, she was a stranger in love with applause. He wore a plain charcoal suit, nothing to hint that the man they saw as the burden had quietly built one of the nation's largest logistics empires. His wheelchair, the symbol of his supposed weakness, had been part of a calculated test, one he had planned long before tonight's dinner. He'd wanted to see what love would do when power was stripped away, what loyalty meant when the mask of wealth was gone. And now, sitting beside the woman who once swore she'd stay, even if the world turned on them, he realized he had his answer. Madeline's laughter was louder tonight, too loud. She leaned toward her mother, whispering something behind her wine glass as she motioned toward Evan's chair. "He still insists on coming to dinners," she said with a cruel smile. "Can you imagine? I told him he could stay home." Grace chuckled softly, touching her pearls. "You're too kind, darling. Some men don't know when to fade away gracefully." Evan's fingers tightened slightly on the armrest, but his face never shifted. He looked at Madeline with the same calm he had the day they met, a day she'd approached him thinking he was a young intern at a charity event. Back then, she'd spoken to him with warmth, laughed at his clumsy jokes, told him she loved his humility. She had no idea the shy man before her was Evan Price, the elusive CEO of Price Global, a company her father had served for 3 decades. Across the table, Leonard Harper raised his glass. "To my daughter's strength," he said, pride swelling in his voice. "She's endured so much these past months. Not every woman could handle the burden of a situation like this." His eyes flicked toward Evan's wheelchair. Madeline smiled, a rehearsed mix of pity and contempt. "Thank you, Daddy. I did what I had to do." That was when she turned to Evan. Maybe it was the wine, maybe the attention, but something cruel sparked behind her eyes. "You know, Evan," she said sweetly, her tone edged with venom, "you could have stayed home tonight. You don't really fit in here anymore." The table chuckled, softly at first, then louder as her lover, Daniel Knox, smirked from across the table. Daniel, the tall, charming project director at Harper & Co., had become a familiar face around the house. Too familiar. Evan had watched the growing comfort between them with quiet eyes, never saying a word. Evan smiled faintly. "You're right," he said, voice calm and low. "I don't fit in, not here, not anymore." The laughter rippled again, encouraged, cruel, safe behind wealth. Madeline leaned forward, whispering loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Maybe you should learn to eat somewhere that suits your level." And then it happened. Sudden, sharp, unplanned. A droplet of her wine-tainted spit hit his cheek. The sound of it landing was louder than any gasp. Time froze. The laughter died. Only the soft hum of the chandelier filled the silence. Evan didn't move. His face stayed still, his gaze steady on hers. Slowly, he reached for the napkin beside his plate and wiped his cheek with surgical precision. "Thank you," he said softly, almost kindly, "for showing me who you really are." Madeline blinked. "Excuse me." He smiled again. This time it wasn't gentle. "You've given me exactly what I needed tonight." Leonard shifted uncomfortably. Grace frowned. Daniel scoffed. "Don't make this dramatic, man. You should be grateful she even—" Evan's eyes cut toward him. Cold, quiet, unreadable. "You'll learn gratitude soon enough, Daniel." He placed the napkin neatly on the table, pushed his chair slightly back, and turned toward Madeline. "I wish you and your family all the success in the world. You'll need it." Madeline laughed awkwardly. "You can't even stand. What could you possibly—" The chair moved with a soft click, and for the first time, Evan rose. The gasp that followed rippled through the room like a ghost passing through walls. His posture was perfect, tall, broad, steady, no limp, no struggle. The man they'd mocked stood effortlessly before them, eyes sharp under the glow of the chandelier. He leaned slightly toward her. "I told you once, Maddie, love reveals truth. Tonight it did." And with that, he walked away, leaving behind a silence heavy enough to drown in. Behind him, Daniel's smirk faltered. Madeline's mouth hung open. Her father's glass trembled slightly. No one spoke as the front door shut quietly. Outside, under the night sky, Evan slipped his phone from his pocket. His reflection glimmered in the black window of his car. A car none of them had noticed before. A Rolls-Royce Phantom, its chrome polished like a mirror. He dialed a number. "Logan," he said when the voice answered, "start the plan. Tonight's dinner gave us all the confirmation we need." A pause, then a smile curved his lips. "Let's show them what happens when you mistake silence for weakness." The following morning, the Harpers' mansion buzzed with the aftermath of humiliation. Madeline barely slept. Her mind replayed the moment Evan stood. Those quiet seconds when the crippled husband she had mocked rose effortlessly before her, his gaze cutting through her pride like a blade. She tried to laugh it off, tried to convince herself it was an act, a cruel trick meant to embarrass her. But no matter how she spun it, something in his voice when he said, "You'll need it," refused to leave her mind. Downstairs, Leonard and Grace spoke in low voices over coffee. "He walked, Leonard," Grace said, her tone unsettled. "After all this time pretending, he stood there like nothing ever happened." Leonard sipped his coffee, forcing composure. "He's nothing but a manipulator, a desperate man trying to guilt our daughter." Grace nodded, but her eyes betrayed unease. "Still, how could he afford that kind of car? Did you see it when he left? That wasn't some ordinary car." Leonard set down his cup, jaw tightening. "I don't care what he drives. What matters is that he's out of her life now. She deserves someone better, someone like Daniel." Daniel. The name itself made Madeline's lips tighten. She thought he would bring comfort, stability, maybe even protection after last night's scene. But as she entered the living room, she found him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, voice trembling slightly. "What do you mean the deal's frozen?" he hissed. "That contract was already approved." He turned sharply when he saw her. "I'll call you back." "Something wrong?" she asked, trying to sound unconcerned. Daniel forced a grin. "Nothing we can't fix, just some corporate nonsense with Price Global." Her head snapped up. "Price Global?" He waved dismissively. "Yeah, the supply chain company your dad's firm works with. The CEO's been making some weird internal changes, reorganizing teams, freezing accounts, cutting contracts. It's chaos right now, but I'll sort it." Madeline frowned. "Why does that sound familiar?" Before she could finish, her father entered, holding his phone. His face had gone pale. "Daniel," he said sharply, "I just got word from our board. Price Global terminated all our contracts overnight. Everyone." "What?" Daniel barked. "That's impossible. They can't just—" "They can," Leonard snapped. "And they did. The CEO himself signed the notice. Evan Price." The name dropped like a grenade. The air thinned. Madeline froze where she stood, her mind trying to piece together the impossible. Grace's teacup rattled. "Evan Price?" Leonard looked from one face to another. As in the same Evan who sat in this dining room last night. Madeline's heart stuttered. Her chest tightened. No, she whispered. It can't be. He's crippled. He's broke. Daniel's voice was quieter now, stripped of arrogance. Your husband's last name was Price, wasn't it? Madeline's lips parted, but no words came. She remembered signing the marriage papers years ago, never asking about his background beyond what he told her, that he was in logistics, that he lived modestly, that money never mattered to him. She had been too enchanted by the idea of being adored to ask deeper questions. Leonard slammed his fist against the counter. That son of a... He set us up. Grace trembled. But why would he hide who he is? Why pretend to be poor? Madeline's voice cracked. Because he wanted to see who I really was. Silence followed, heavy and cruel. She felt it crawl over her skin, that realization that every cruel word, every moment of pity, every whispered insult had been a test, and she had failed it miserably. Daniel's phone buzzed again. He answered it quickly, pacing. Yes, I'm listening. What do you mean the investors pulled out? That's not... No, don't hang up on me. Hello? He stared at his screen. They're all gone, every one of them. Leonard was already calling someone else. William, listen. Evan Price is not who we thought. He's the CEO. He's shutting us out. Hello? William? He cursed softly. They're dropping us, too. Madeline sank into the sofa, trembling. He said we'd need success, she whispered. He said it right before he walked out. Grace moved toward her. Sweetheart, but Madeline pushed her away. He's destroying us, she muttered. Every deal, every investor, every client. He's taking them all. She stood abruptly. I need to talk to him. He won't do this to me. Not to me. Daniel stepped in front of her. Madeline, slow down. You humiliated the man in front of everyone. You spat on him. Do you really think he's going to listen to you now? Her eyes were wild. He loved me once. Daniel shook his head. You should start praying that love isn't the reason he's doing this. By noon, Madeline was standing outside the sleek black gates of Price Global headquarters, a fortress of glass and steel that gleamed like the crown jewel of the city. Every part of it screamed wealth and precision. She felt small, insignificant, staring at the logo she'd ignored for years, never realizing it belonged to the man she had just betrayed. The receptionist didn't even look up when she said, I'm here to see Mr. Price. Do you have an appointment? He's my husband. That got her a glance, but not sympathy. Mr. Price doesn't take unannounced visitors. Madeline's chest heaved. Tell him it's Madeline. Tell him I need to see him. The woman typed something, waited a beat, and then looked back up. He said to tell you this. Now you'll see what truth costs. Madeline's lips trembled. He actually said that? Yes, the woman replied softly. And he also said, you're not his wife anymore. Madeline froze. What? The receptionist's tone softened. He already filed this morning. The divorce papers have been processed. Madeline felt her knees weaken. The marble floor beneath her shimmered as tears filled her eyes. Around her, employees passed by, polished, powerful, efficient, belonging to the world Evan built. A world she'd spat on without knowing it was his. And above the entrance, gleaming in gold letters, was the motto she had once mocked when she saw it on documents lying around the house. Integrity builds empires. She finally understood what it meant. Rain streaked down the glass walls of Evan's penthouse that evening, tracing crooked lines down the skyline's reflection. The city below glittered with life, unaware that one man's vengeance had quietly begun reshaping its foundations. Evan stood by the window, hands in his pockets, his reflection fractured by raindrops. Behind him, the fire crackled gently in the marble hearth, throwing soft light over the vast room. Logan Pierce, his longtime friend and private investigator, entered with a tablet in hand. It's done, he said. Harper & Co. is on the brink of collapse. Price Global just bought out their supply chain partners. Daniel Knox's shares dropped 40% this afternoon. Investors are running. Evan turned slowly. His expression didn't show joy, only cold satisfaction. And Madeline, Logan hesitated. She's been calling your assistant, the front desk, even the PR team. begging to talk. She came to the headquarters earlier. Evan nodded once. I know. You saw her? I watched from the surveillance feed, he said calmly. She stood there like a stranger in a world she thought she understood. Logan sighed, setting the tablet on the table. You sure you want to go this far, Ev? You've already taken down her father's company. She's got nowhere left. Evan's eyes hardened. Logan, when I first met her, I thought she saw me for who I was, not for what I had. I needed to believe love wasn't just a transaction. So I hid my name, my wealth, everything. I wanted to see her heart before she saw my bank account. He walked toward the fire, his tone quieter now but edged with grief. When I got into that car accident 3 years ago and pretended the injuries never healed, she cried every night for the first 2 months. Then she started sleeping in another room. Then she started attending charity dinners that didn't exist. Her love faded faster than my fake crutch could gather dust. He picked up a framed photo from the mantel, an old picture of them on their wedding day. Madeline's smile was radiant, genuine. She had no idea the man holding her hand was one of the richest men in the country. I gave her a chance, he continued, 1,000 of them. But last night, when she spat on me, he clenched his jaw. She spat on the man who gave her everything. Logan exhaled. So what now? Evan set the frame down gently. Now we finish what we started. 2 days later, the Harper estate was silent. The once bustling mansion, filled with servants, parties, and laughter, had turned into a graveyard of memories. Madeline stood at the large window overlooking the garden, where flowers drooped under unkept care. The electricity had been cut hours ago. Her father was pacing, phone pressed to his ear, shouting at someone about foreclosure and unpaid loans. Her mother sat on the couch, pale and silent. Madeline's hands trembled as she scrolled through her phone. Every account, frozen, her cards declined. Their family business, gone. Even Daniel wasn't answering her calls anymore. When the front door creaked open, she turned, expecting him, hoping it was Daniel coming to comfort her. But instead it was a man in a dark gray suit. Calm, composed, holding an envelope. Mrs. Harper, he said formally. Madeline blinked. It's Price, she muttered weakly. Madeline Price. The man nodded once. Not anymore. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Evan Price. He placed the envelope on the coffee table. These are official property transfer documents. The house now belongs to Price Global Holdings. You have 48 hours to vacate. Grace gasped. You can't do this. This is our home. The man didn't flinch. Your husband's company used this property as collateral. With the company's collapse, the ownership transferred automatically. I'm just delivering notice. Madeline took a step forward, her voice shaking. Did Evan send you? Yes, ma'am. He also asked me to deliver a message. The man paused, opening a small note from his breast pocket and reading aloud. You spat on me because you thought I was beneath you. Now you'll learn how high the ground really was. Madeline's face drained of color. The man gave a polite nod and left, his footsteps echoing down the marble hall until the heavy doors shut behind him. Leonard's rage exploded. That bastard ruined us. Madeline turned on him, tears streaming down her face. You told me to leave him. You said he was nothing. You said Daniel would secure us a better future. Her father's voice broke. I didn't know he was the man behind everything. You think I'd have risked this if I'd known? Grace sobbed quietly. All those years your father served him, all those bonuses, those gifts. I thought it was kindness. I never knew it was him. Madeline stared blankly at the envelope. Her reflection in the glossy surface showed someone unrecognizable. A woman stripped of her arrogance, her comfort, her illusions. In a desperate moment, she dialed Daniel again. This time he answered, voice rough and impatient. Daniel, thank God. Don't call me again, Maddie, he cut in. It's over. What? What do you mean it's over? He laughed bitterly. Evan Price called me this morning. He bought out my company. I'm finished. My name's blacklisted in every major firm. You brought me into a war I didn't start, and now I've lost everything. Daniel, please, I need you. But the line went dead. Madeline dropped the phone, falling to her knees as tears streamed down her face. Her father's yelling blurred into the background, her mother's sobs a distant hum. Her mind was back at that dinner table, his calm voice, his quiet smile, his words. "You'll need it." The truth finally crushed her. He hadn't been warning her. He'd been promising her fate. That night, Evan stood once again by the window of his penthouse, watching lightning strike over the city. His phone buzzed. It was Logan again. "They've lost everything," Logan said quietly. "The mansion, the company, their reputation, it's all gone. You've done it." Evan stared at the skyline. "Not yet." Logan frowned. "What's left?" He turned slightly, eyes cold and distant. "I want her to see me again, not as the man she pitied, but as the man she destroyed. And I want her to know that every smile she faked will cost her something real." Logan hesitated, then nodded. "You sure you can handle seeing her again?" Evan's lips curved faintly. "I'm not going there for closure. I'm going there for finality." The night of the charity gala arrived, an event that once defined Madeline's world of power and illusion. She'd attended it every year since she was 20, gliding through crowds of wealthy donors and glittering chandeliers, with her parents at her side. But tonight, the Harper family no longer appeared on the guest list. Their name had vanished from every invitation, every acknowledgement. Yet the ballroom still bore the golden banners of Price Global, fluttering proudly over a sea of elegance. Madeline arrived uninvited, her old silver gown borrowed and slightly frayed at the seams. She had no chauffeur, no jewelry, no entourage, just desperation. The valet looked hesitant when she stepped out of a taxi, but she walked in anyway, her chin trembling, her heels unsteady. The guards recognized her, exchanged uncertain glances, then allowed her through when she whispered, "I just need to see him." Inside, the world she'd lost shimmered around her. Music, laughter, perfume, money. She was invisible now, swallowed by the glitter. At the far end of the hall, under a chandelier that spilled light like melted gold, Evan Price stood surrounded by board members, investors, and city officials. He looked nothing like the man she'd spat on. The same calm eyes, but sharper. The same face, but harder. His tailored black tuxedo fit perfectly. His presence commanded the room. Every conversation hushed slightly when he turned. He no longer looked like a man. He looked like power itself. She froze, her breath catching. The truth of her downfall pressed against her ribs. That man, her husband, was everything she'd spent her life chasing in others. Someone whispered near her, "That's Evan Price, the reclusive CEO everyone's been talking about. They say he just acquired the Harper estate. Ruthless genius." She wanted to scream that he wasn't ruthless, that he was hers or had been, but she couldn't, because the man standing there wasn't the one she'd known. He was the one she had created through betrayal. The crowd parted slightly when he began walking toward the stage. As he passed her, she whispered his name. "Evan." He stopped, slowly turned. For a moment, the room vanished for both of them. "Madeline." His voice was calm, deliberate. "You shouldn't be here." Her eyes filled. "I had to see you. Please, just 1 minute." He looked down at her, her trembling hands, her fading dress, her haunted eyes. She wasn't the woman he'd married anymore. She was the ghost of her own arrogance. He gave a small nod. 1 minute. They stepped aside into a quieter corridor lined with portraits of Price Global's founders. The music dimmed behind them. Madeline's hands shook as she tried to speak. "Evan, I was wrong. I didn't know who you really were. I didn't mean those things I said that night. I thought you'd changed. I thought you gave up." He studied her face, his expression unreadable. "You thought I gave up because I stopped fighting for your approval." Her lip quivered. "I loved you once." He tilted his head slightly. "No, Madeline. You loved who you thought I was until you saw weakness. Then you loved the idea of leaving me." She stepped closer, desperate. "Please don't do this to my family. My parents, they've lost everything. I've lost everything. I'm begging you." His eyes flicked away for a moment, distant, thoughtful, then back to her. "Do you know what I learned pretending to be crippled?" She swallowed. "What?" "That pity is louder than love. People love you until you need something real from them. Then they look away." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. You looked away, Maddie. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I made a mistake. Please, I'll do anything. He stared at her for a long moment. Then gently he reached into his pocket and handed her a folded piece of paper. She hesitated before opening it, and when she did, her knees almost buckled. It was a check, not to her name, but to the Harper Family Foundation, reinstated and funded with an astronomical amount. I'm not you, he said quietly. I don't destroy for pleasure. I destroy for justice. Your father gave 30 years of service to my company. Your mother volunteered at our charity hospitals. They lost their way, but they don't deserve ruin. So I'll rebuild them. But you, he paused, eyes steady on hers. You'll rebuild yourself. Her lips trembled. Why would you still help us? He smiled faintly. Because I want you to live long enough to understand the cost of what you threw away. Her breath caught. Evan, please, can we start over? He shook his head. No. Madeline, you killed the man who wanted that. She reached for his hand, but he stepped back. The distance between them felt like a canyon she could never cross. He turned toward the ballroom doors, adjusting his cufflinks. Go home, he said softly. You don't belong here anymore. As he walked back into the golden light of the gala, applause erupted. The board was welcoming him to the stage for his speech. Madeline stood frozen, her reflection in the glass showing the truth she could no longer escape. She watched as he stood before hundreds, his voice calm and confident. Tonight, he said, we celebrate integrity, the foundation of everything we build. Without it, wealth is empty. With it, even loss has purpose. The crowd applauded again. Madeline's tears blurred the scene, her body trembling. She turned and walked out through the same doors she once entered in pride, her footsteps echoing softly in the marble hall. Outside, the city lights glittered like fragments of the life she had shattered. As she stepped into the rain, a sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up at the curb. The driver rolled down the window slightly. Evan's voice came through, calm and final. Madeline, he said. She turned, eyes pleading. He looked at her for a long second before saying, Karma doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers goodbye. The car pulled away, taillights fading into the rain. Madeline stood alone in the cold night, the rain mingling with her tears, realizing the bitter truth. She had lost more than wealth. She had lost the only man who ever truly saw her. And somewhere above the city, in a penthouse of glass and silence, Evan Price closed his eyes, not in victory, but in closure. The test was over. The lesson was eternal. The matter of Evan and Madeline Price spread across news channels like wildfire. Every tabloid headline screamed betrayal, deceit, and revenge. Billionaire CEO pretended to be crippled to test wife's loyalty. Within a week, reporters camped outside Madeline's temporary apartment, shouting questions each time she left for court. Inside the small apartment, the walls felt too close. She'd gone from a mansion with servants to a rented room with flickering lights. Her phone rang nonstop. Lawyers, journalists, even old friends pretending to care. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the newspaper photo of Evan at the gala. Tall, confident, smiling beside dignitaries. The caption read, Evan Price, America's quiet genius. Her lawyer, Cheryl Vaughn, sat opposite her, a sharp woman in her 40s with nerves of steel. We have one chance, Madeline, she said. We argue deception, that he lied about his identity and wealth during the marriage. That gives us grounds to demand a share of Price Global. Madeline's voice cracked. You think we can win? Cheryl smiled thinly. We can try, but you'll have to hold yourself together in that courtroom. No tears, no temper. He'll play the calm victim. You play the woman who was misled. Madeline nodded, but her eyes betrayed something darker. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about revenge. She wanted to hurt him the way he'd humiliated her. Publicly, permanently. The courtroom buzzed with reporters and cameras when the case Price versus Price began. On one side sat Madeline and her parents. On the other, Evan, calm, composed, surrounded by his legal team. When she walked in, he didn't even look up. The judge entered, the air stilled. Cheryl rose first. Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Madeline Price, was deceived for years. Mr. Price pretended to be disabled, hiding his wealth and true identity, subjecting her to emotional distress and public humiliation. We seek financial restitution for years of manipulation and breach of marital trust. Evan's attorney Nathan Rowe stood next, voice steady. Your Honor, my client owes Mrs. Price nothing. Every choice she made was her own. Mr. Price's wealth was lawfully earned before the marriage. Her actions, including adultery and public humiliation, are well documented. Madeline's eyes snapped toward Evan. Adultery? He wouldn't dare. But then Nathan lifted a folder. Exhibit A, Your Honor. Photographs of Mrs. Price in multiple public settings with Mr. Daniel Knox, while still legally married. Gas rippled through the room. Cameras clicked furiously. Madeline's parents froze. Daniel's name was like poison in the air. Madeline whispered, How did he? Evan finally looked at her, eyes cold. You taught me how betrayal feels, Maddie. I just learned faster than you thought. But the shock of the day wasn't Evan's evidence. It was the sound of two voices behind him when the defense called its next witnesses. The bailiff's voice echoed, Call Noah Price and Ava Price to the stand. Madeline's world tilted. Her breath caught. Her two children, 17-year-old Noah and 15-year-old Ava, walked into the courtroom. Her son looked sharp, composed like his father. Her daughter's eyes were swollen from tears. No, Madeline whispered, gripping the table. Not them. The judge nodded for them to proceed. Nathan approached gently. Noah, can you tell the court how your parents' relationship changed when your father when he pretended to be crippled? Noah interrupted. His tone was firm but respectful. Mom stopped caring. She laughed about him to her friends. She said she'd married a mistake. She even told us not to tell him when she went out with Mr. Knox. The gallery murmured. Madeline's tears fell silently. Ava's voice trembled when she spoke next. I used to think she just didn't love him anymore. But the night of the dinner, when she spat on him, I saw his face. He didn't look angry. He looked broken. And that's when I realized the crippled man I was ashamed of was actually the strongest person I knew. Madeline covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. Her parents stared in silence. Evan watched, face unreadable, though his eyes softened slightly when Ava spoke. Cheryl stood quickly. Objection, Your Honor. Emotional manipulation. Overruled, said the judge. Let them finish. Noah turned to his mother, voice shaking. Mom, Dad never tested you to hurt you. He tested you to believe in something real. You failed him, but you failed us too. Madeline's shoulders trembled as the courtroom fell silent again. Evan's lawyer nodded. No further questions? When the children stepped down, Evan gave a small nod toward them. Gratitude without words. The session ended shortly after. Madeline sat frozen, staring at the empty witness stand. Her children hadn't just chosen sides, they'd chosen truth. Outside, cameras flashed as she exited. Reporters shouted questions. Mrs. Price, how do you feel about your children testifying against you? She said nothing. That night, alone in her apartment, she poured wine into a chipped glass and stared at the floor. Her entire plan was falling apart. But the storm inside her hadn't died. If the court wouldn't save her, she'd find another way. Her reflection in the window looked nothing like the woman who once lived for approval. Her lips curved into a trembling, bitter smile. You think it's over, Evan? She whispered. You haven't seen what desperation can do. The rain returned the next morning, sharp, relentless, and cold, like judgment from the sky. In the heart of the city, Evan's legal team gathered inside the glass conference room of Price Global's headquarters, preparing for the next round of the trial. But none of them expected what Madeline was about to unleash. Her attorney, Cheryl Vaughn, had spent the night drafting a new motion that could shift the entire momentum. In the motion's title, 4 words glared like a threat. Hidden identity, concealed marriage assets. By noon, it was trending across every news outlet. Madeline arrived at court looking sharper, calmer, dressed in a black suit, her hair perfectly tied back. The media swarmed around her like moths drawn to the glow of a woman reborn from scandal. The same woman who had wept before cameras a week ago now smiled faintly as she walked through the courthouse doors. Inside, Cheryl whispered, We've got them off balance. The public's sympathy has shifted since your testimony. You're the deceived wife now." Madeline exhaled shakily. "Good. Let's make him feel what I felt." Evan entered minutes later, quiet and unshaken. His children were seated behind him. Noah looked protective. Ava avoided eye contact with her mother. The judge called for order. Cheryl rose immediately, her tone cool and deliberate. "Your Honor, while the defense has painted my client as a manipulative adulteress, we now have evidence that Mr. Price concealed substantial marital assets through offshore accounts during the marriage, accounts registered under aliases, created long before his so-called test of loyalty. This deception constitutes fraud." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even Nathan, Evan's attorney, looked caught off guard for a split second. Evan's gaze didn't move from Madeline. His face was unreadable. Cheryl continued, sliding documents across the bench. Bank records, wire transfers, corporate restructuring, all proving that Mr. Price hid nearly $500 million during the years of marriage. "We are seeking an emergency injunction to freeze those funds." The judge frowned. "Mr. Rowe," Nathan stood, "Your Honor, this is theatrical nonsense. These are business accounts held under corporate subsidiaries. They existed before the marriage." Cheryl smirked. "Then why were they transferred to private holdings 6 months after their wedding?" Nathan hesitated, glancing briefly at Evan. "There are strategic reasons for those movements." Cheryl seized the moment. "Strategic deceit, Your Honor. My client deserves half of every cent hidden from her." The judge tapped his pen, clearly intrigued. "I'll review the evidence. Until then, Mr. Price, the accounts will remain under temporary freeze." Madeline's lips twitched into a small, triumphant smile. Evan's empire, immovable and vast, had finally been touched. Later that evening, Madeline sat in her lawyer's office, staring at the headlines. Madeline Price strikes back. Court freezes Billionaire's hidden accounts. Cheryl poured her a glass of champagne. "You did well today. The world loves a comeback story. You're the wronged woman now, not the villain." Madeline smiled faintly. "Let him taste loss. Just for a while." But as the bubbles fizzed in her glass, she couldn't ignore a nagging thought. How calm Evan had been in court. Too calm. He hadn't reacted, hadn't defended himself, hadn't even looked angry. He'd simply observed, like a man watching a movie he'd already seen. The next morning, that unease turned to dread. Cheryl burst into her apartment, face pale. "Madeline, we have a problem." Madeline sat up in bed. "What now?" "Those documents," Cheryl's voice shook. "They weren't leaked by your investigator. They were planted." Madeline frowned. "Planted? What do you mean?" "Those accounts you used in court? They're real, but they're charity endowments registered under your children's names." Madeline froze. "What?" Cheryl nodded, horrified. Price Global's legal department just submitted a motion proving that the so-called hidden funds were trust accounts established for Noah and Ava years ago. You didn't expose his secrets, Madeline. You accused him of hiding money meant for your own kids. Her stomach twisted. No, that's not possible. He tricked me." Cheryl's voice broke. "He let you find exactly what he wanted you to find." Court resumed that afternoon, and this time the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Reporters filled every row, ready for blood. Nathan rose first, his voice cutting through the tension. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's accusations have now been proven false. The accounts Mrs. Price cited belong to irrevocable trusts established for their children's education and future philanthropic work. This means her lawsuit has directly endangered those trusts." Madeline's breath hitched. "That's not true. He's twisting it." Nathan turned to her. "Is it? Then why did you authorize your lawyer to request liquidation of the funds?" Gas filled the room again. Madeline's face went pale. Cheryl looked down, silent. Evan stood buttoning his suit calmly. "Your Honor, I could have exposed this privately, but since she wanted a public trial, let the world see the truth. She tried to destroy not only me, but her own children's future, for revenge." The judge's gavel struck once. Mrs. Price, this is a serious accusation. We will reconvene tomorrow after reviewing all records. As the room emptied, Madeline turned toward Evan, tears streaking her makeup. You set me up. You wanted me to look like a monster. He met her eyes, voice steady. No, Madeline, I wanted you to see the monster you've become. Her voice cracked. You're cruel. Evan's expression didn't change. No, I'm thorough. That night, Noah came to see her at her apartment. His eyes were red, his voice trembling. Mom, how could you try to take what Dad built for us? She reached for him, but he stepped back. I didn't know, she pleaded. He planned it all. I swear, I didn't know. Noah's jaw tightened. You never know until it's too late. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. He doesn't hate you, Mom. He just doesn't believe in you anymore. That's worse. The door closed behind him. Madeline sank to the floor, shaking. Somewhere deep inside, she realized the cruelest revenge wasn't Evan's empire crushing her. It was the quiet way he had turned her own choices into her destruction. The courthouse steps were a storm of cameras and shouted questions when the final hearing began. Reporters crowded the marble entryway, microphones flashing like lightning. The words Price versus Price, final verdict, scrolled across every live feed in the city. Inside, the air was heavy, electric. Madeline sat stiffly beside her lawyer, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. The dark circles beneath her eyes told the story of sleepless nights and collapsed pride. Behind her sat Leonard and Grace, broken shells of the social icons they once were. Across the aisle, Evan sat in quiet authority, flanked by his children. Noah's arm was protectively around Ava. They looked more like allies than offspring, heirs of resilience, not resentment. The judge entered, his robes whispering against the floor. Court is in session. He adjusted his glasses. We have reviewed all evidence, motions, and testimony. Madeline's hands trembled slightly. She clasped them together on the table, trying to steady her breath. The judge continued, his tone firm. Mrs. Price's claim of concealed assets is unfounded. The accounts in question are legally documented family trusts for the children. Furthermore, evidence shows intentional misuse of confidential information and an attempt to liquidate said funds for personal gain. Cheryl Vaughn stood. Your Honor, my client acted on misinformation, not malice. The gavel struck once. Silence, counsel. This court has also reviewed evidence of extramarital conduct, emotional cruelty, and public defamation against Mr. Price. Therefore, all claims by Mrs. Price are dismissed with prejudice. Custody of the minor child, Ava Price, is granted to Mr. Price. Noah Price, being of age, remains under his father's guardianship voluntarily. Mrs. Price will receive no spousal support. A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the reporters in the back went still. Madeline's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The words no spousal support echoed in her head like a sentence to exile. The judge's final line landed like a hammer. Let this case serve as precedent. Truth may hide in silence, but deceit eventually screams its name. Gavel, bang. Outside, the crowd erupted. Reporters shouted, flashes burst, and live broadcasts streamed the moment Madeline stumbled down the steps, shielding her face from cameras. Every screen in the plaza showed Evan exiting on the opposite side, calm, composed, his children beside him. Mr. Price, what do you say to those who call this the most brutal divorce in corporate history? A reporter yelled. Evan paused, his expression unreadable. I don't celebrate destruction, he said evenly. I just stopped protecting what no longer deserved protection. He guided Ava toward their car. Noah followed silently. That evening, Madeline sat in the dark corner of a cafe across from the courthouse, watching the replay on a mounted television. Her name had become a headline, a cautionary tale. Society wife loses everything to secret billionaire husband. Every whisper around her felt aimed at her. She had once been the center of admiration. Now she was an exhibit in a morality play. The door chimed, and for a moment, her breath caught. Evan walked in, alone, no entourage, no security. He noticed her but didn't look surprised. Slowly, he crossed the room and stopped at her table. Can I sit? She nodded numbly. He took the seat opposite her, folding his hands. You still drink coffee black, he said quietly. She looked down. I don't remember the last time I tasted anything. A pause lingered. Then she whispered, You won. He studied her for a long moment. No one wins in wars of love, Madeline. Some just survive longer. Her eyes glistened. Do the kids hate me? No, he said softly. They pity you. They'll forgive you one day, but they won't forget. Her voice broke. You destroyed me. He shook his head. You built your own destruction. I just stopped holding it up. Silence stretched between them. The rain outside streaked the cafe window like tears neither of them wanted to show. Finally, Evan slid an envelope across the table. That's for you. She frowned, opening it. Inside was a property deed, small townhouse, modest neighborhood, paid in full. Her eyes filled again. Why? He looked away. Because vengeance ends where decency begins. I won't have my children believe cruelty defines strength. Her lips quivered. You still care. He stood, buttoning his coat. Once, enough to learn how to stop. He hesitated before walking away, then said quietly, Build something real this time. The door closed behind him, the bell chiming softly. Months passed. The city moved on to new scandals. Price Global thrived, expanding into new territories. Evan's name became synonymous with discipline and quiet power. Madeline lived quietly in her small townhouse. The reporters stopped coming. Sometimes she'd see her children on television beside their father at charity events, smiling. She'd pause the screen, fingers trembling on their faces. One afternoon, she found a small box on her doorstep. No sender, no note. Inside was a photograph, her family from years ago, before the lies, before the test. On the back in Evan's handwriting were 4 words. Love was the lesson. She pressed the photo to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. For the first time, there was no anger in them, only realization. Outside, the city skyline glowed with Price Global's towering sign, the words catching the dying light. Integrity builds empires. And beneath that glow, Madeline finally understood. What she had lost was never his wealth or status. It was the privilege of being loved by a man who valued truth above everything.